take us back to when you made that leap. Was it from investment banking into wine? Can you
Yeah.
talk about it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so basically, I worked most of my working life in finance. I was derivative trader, and I moved to Greece with my Greek wife and our children at the end of 2003. And I was working in Athens for a startup hedge fund. And then in 2008, the crisis started to happen. And to me, it became very quickly clear that there was no real future in anything related to finance and banking in Greece. Wines had always been a great love of mine. It was my hobby, basically. And when I moved to Greece in 2004, it was an eye-opener for me because until that point, I had tasted like whatever classic wines there were to taste. So basically limited to Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Riesling, Merlot. That was all there was, right? And I come to Greece and it's like, wow, there are so many varieties here. It's like impossible to get bored with these wines because you can pair them with food, and it was just an amazing experience. And I noticed every year that the quality, start to get better and better, clearly. And so in the last quarter of 2008, I researched the exports of Greek wines on a global basis. 90% of all the Greek wines that were produced were consumed within the country. So only 10% of the production was being exported, which is a very low number. But then again, from these 10%, more than half of them were from the three biggest Greek wineries. So you had like, hey, there are all these interesting wines from smaller producers and no one was exporting them. And I thought, okay, there is something completely out of sync. And maybe this is a good chance to start a business with Greek wines. I decided because there were so many misconceptions in the market about Greek wines and basically no knowledge around it all. At that point in the internet, there was only one web page concerning Greek wines, and that was a static one. So clearly, people didn't know anything about Greek wines. And I thought, okay, if I want to do this business, I need to build up demand myself. And I started my wine blog at the time in beginning of 2009 called elinos.com. And I wrote there for 5 or 6 years on a weekly basis and, educating about Greek wines, videos on Greek wine, introducing growers. And at the same time, I became extremely active on social media, especially on Twitter, which really started to take off in 2009. And at that time, it was really beautiful because you could engage with people. So I very clearly identified everyone on a global basis who was an influencer in wine, be that wine journalists, restaurant owner, wine critics, and so on. And I targeted all these people and got in touch with them on Twitter, telling them little stories. And I branded myself really quickly. So within a few months, I became known as like, oh, there is this crazy German guy who is an expert on Greek wine. And actually, the Greek wineries at the time, they would refer to me, o trelos Germanos, the crazy German. And what happened then was that the interest I saw was really mostly coming out in the US. There were people who were really interested in learning about Greek wines. They were open-minded. And I remember, talking to my wife and saying, well, maybe I should look at the US market. Now, at that point, from a business perspective, I had no clue about the wine business, about exporting Greek wines, especially to the US market. But that is something where you don't really need a talent for. I mean, that's the hard work, figure out the logistics and so on. And there was one guy at the time who was very well known in the US. He's called Gary Vaynerchuk. He had this show, this web show, Wine Library TV, which was being watched by up to 50,000 people every show. And sometimes he had guests on board, usually quite famous people from the world of wines, winemakers and so on, or Jancis Robinson, Master of Wine, she was on there. And when I saw this tweet, what can I do for you? I just replied to him and said, can I come to your show? And Gary replied back and said, sure, let me check with my assistant and I'll give you a date. And that was an amazing experience. So I flew to New York. I went on the Wine Library TV show with him. It was aired the next day. And like within 24 hours, an importer got in touch with me, a Californian importer, still working with this importer today. So this is how it all started out. Greece, it's like one of the oldest wine producing countries in the world, but it's also one of the newest at the same time, because the modern wine industry really started out in the 1960s. So you have all these sorts of things. You have the culture, you have stories to tell. For example, there's one winery I work with, they are from Nausa, and they actually, in the 1980s, I think, they owned land where they had their vineyards, and then there was a storm and the tree fell down, and the roots from the tree opened up the entry to a cave. And the owner of the winery, he contacted the authorities in Athens, because there had been rumors for several hundred years that Aristotle had taught Alexander the Great there. And so the expert came and they figured out, yes, this is the original cave where Alexander the Great was taught by Aristotle. So they paid off the winery to purchase the land. The winery was happy because they got good money for it, and they purchased a new vineyard 3 times the size. So everyone is happy, and you can go there today in Nausa and you can visit this cave where Alexander the Great was taught by Aristotle. And you know, when you tell these stories in the US market, it's like everyone wants to buy that wine, right? Just because it's really, you have the background. Learning curve of the Greek growers has been amazing. I mean, since the 1980s, and then we end at 2000, 2010, and it's just keeps on going up and up. And you have many young people now who are very well educated, who are passionate about it. But also, I think the crisis at the end of the day, the financial crisis, helped a lot, because what happened was 2008 through 2015, basically, that the demand within the country got lower and lower because people couldn't afford to buy wines or to buy a bottle of wine. So the Greek producers were suddenly forced to look at the export market, because they had, there were some wineries, they had, they sold 50% less than the decade before. So everyone was really forced to try to look abroad and open up their horizons. And I think that at the end of the day has done a lot of good. It's also that with the sudden interest of everyone wanting to export, it was also that, the wines of Greece, the organizations, the various organizations had become quite smart actually in marketing the products, and they had the funds and they put it all to work. Also, producers suddenly grouped themselves together in different areas to promote all the wines from that area, which until that point was unheard of. It was, when I started out, there were some regions where one winemaker wouldn't talk to the next one because they wanted to protect their own interests. And then all this financial crisis happened, and they were suddenly forced to think differently, do things in a different way. Lots of factors came together to promote the Greek wines as such, to educate the market. And I think, as I mentioned, I think the last 3 to 4 years, my business has doubled nearly every year over the last 4 years. So this is why I'm saying that I think, we're really entering a steep growing curve. You have people like Janice Robinson, Master of Wine, who is one of the world's, best known wine personalities. She's getting behind Greek wines. They taste many more Greek wines. They write about it. You see smaller, very interesting wineries making it into the UK market. So it's like a global thing. But I think the most of the current growth is probably, in terms of volume, is probably in the US. So for example, in the US, it's probably the second most important country for Greek wine imports, but they have a much higher average bottle price. Other markets, it's Belgium, France, Cyprus. First of all, I think buying in people from the trade over the last few years. So restaurant owners, people who run very good wine shops and so on. they come to Greece and I give them the whole experience. When they come over, I take my time. We visit maybe 1 or 2 wineries a day. We spend some time on an island in Crete, for example, where we also do a sailing trip. So they experience the wines, they experience the people, they experience the culture, they experience the amazing raw beauty of Greece. And they are floored. When they arrive, especially when they're first-time visitors, they all tell me, Marcus, I have never in my life had such an experience. Usually when we go to a region, we in the car, we rush from one winery to the next one, do one tasting after the other ones. And we do it differently here. If we go back, hundreds of years, small families have always produced their own wine, right? You don't need a large plot of land, but for family consumption, many families were producing their own wines. So, and they were being consumed with food. So in general, Greek wines are never too heavy. They are always on the lower side on alcohol. They have quite often this amazing acidity, which makes them fresh. They have a lot of finesse because you have so many mountains. You have the real hot islands. Take Santorini, for example, which is a volcanic island. So you have a lot of history there, and you have lots of differences. You can get Greek wines that are grown in high altitudes, up to 3,000 feet even. So you tend to have in summer, the day is very hot, but then in the evening it cools down, and at nighttime it's really cooling down and you need to check it. So you have many of these regions in Greece, which makes the wine, which gives the wine acidity. It gives the wine, it tastes like a wine from a cool climate growing wine region, but it is from Greece. Then you tend to have these amazing areas. Take Santorini with Asiatico, or take Crete with all its indigenous variety, where the varieties, because they have been grown for so many centuries there, to the climate, right? So in Santorini, which is probably the hottest wine region in all of Greece, the vines have to dig the roots really deep down in order to get nutrition for the plant, for the vines. And you tend to get these wines that are extremely, how can I put it? They are not your normal average wine. These are wines that talk to you. I mean, you drink it and they are now being recognized globally as, as high as quality as the best Burgundy white wines, which have for centuries been the one showcase. So it's also, when you go to another area, you go to main Greece, to Nausa, for example, which is home to a variety called Xenomavro. There again, I mean, it's you do have the microclimate there that just yields these wines that are very different in tasting profile than anything you have tasted. I mean, Xenomavro quite often has this like olive tomato character, which is like just so bloody unique. But there are many wines, if you're taking the national varieties, this tastes like cherry, this tastes like strawberry. Yeah, but have you got a wine that tastes of olives and tomatoes? Have you in Crete, there is one wine that tastes of laurel, which is just mind-blowing, right? So, and you do get this diversity in Greece. I mean, we have about 300 indigenous varieties that are grown. That's kind of hard to beat. California, I take you on any day. Well, I mean, first of all, I think you should try any Greek variety that you have never had before, because there are always such nice surprises there. So do try Santorini, do try Crete, do try Nausa, do try Amindia, and areas from the Peloponnese. I'd say really quickly. I mean, you can try every area, of course, but these are little gems. I'm sure you won't be disappointed.
Like, what are your impressions of Greece, Greek people, the culture? Let's speak to that a little bit if you can.
I live in an area called Piraiki, which is a very small pocket of Piraeus. I'm very close to the sea, like 150 meters walk, 1 minute walk, I'm at the sea. What my impressions about Greece, I mean, I love Greece. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I think, first of all, the light you have in Greece is just, it's always, you know, of course you do have some cloudy days, but in general, you have just always this amazing light, which is fantastic. I love the weather, especially summertime, of course. I love that everyone is really living outside. I mean, from kind of like from May through to November, you know, you live outside. You always have sun. It's very nice temperatures. I love the Greek people. I think it's easy to connect with people. It's easy to make friends. So even me, when I moved back here and lived in Piraiki, I didn't know a soul. By now I have quite a few very good friends. I like the lifestyle in Greece. I think, you know, there are so many things. For example, family is important to Greeks, which I love a lot. People are friendly. They love to share. And when you go out and you have a meal, it can be a simple meal, but there's always laughter. There's a lot of, you know, chatting going on. People are loud. People are, you know, express themselves. And I like the nightlife in Greece. You know, it's just, you know, when you live in the country where it's, you know, 25 degrees Celsius in the evenings, after midnight, you know, it's nice. 2009, I spent 6 to 9 months just driving through Greece to find wineries, driving all over mainland Greece, been to many islands. I probably have seen more of Greece than most Greeks have. You know, Greece is so fantastic, but what people don't know is that Greece is like the second most mountainous region in all of Europe, right? People always think it's just the beach and the islands, but Greece has it all. So one of my favorite places is probably Amindion in Florida, which is more like, you could easily guess you're in Switzerland. Another region I love is the region of Aquileia in Peloponnese, which is kind of like between Corinth and Patras, which is also has like the second largest ski resort in all of Greece. Wineries I work with there, I mean, they can literally in April, they can go skiing and then drive all the way down to the sea and take a swim. I mean, that's just amazing. I love Crete, the island of Crete. I think the food there is amazing. People there are amazing.
What are you working on right now?
I mean, I'm basically exporting Greek wines to the US. I work as an agent, so I'm not purchasing the wines myself and sell them on. I work with about 15 wineries from Greece. And I work in several states, in Massachusetts, in California, New York. And actually, like the last couple of weeks, I added 2 new importers, one in New York and a second importer in Massachusetts. So it has been quite a busy time.